And what is going on, guys, and welcome back to the Pick Swap Media YouTube channel. We are here for some more NBA draft breakdown today, and we got a very special guest with us. Of course, my guy, as usual, Ryan Coyle, and with us today, Ryan Hammer joining us. So you've seen Ryan all over the place with the draft content. Ryan, I'll throw it to you right off the bat. You can follow him on Twitter at RyanHammer09, on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at RyanHammer9. Does an awesome job covering it from top to bottom. And to throw it to you right off the top here, is this draft class as poor as everyone is making out to be?
First of all, thanks for having me on. But I don't know. It's tough. I think people say that because there's not as some clear cut stars at the top. Like there usually are. Last year was an exceptional class, but even the years prior with was that Paolo, Chet, and Jabari, and you go back like John Zion in 2019. Like every year, there's usually a couple of guys that you're like, yeah, all star, 100%. You can see it happening, but it's tougher this year. That not to say that Alex Sarr, Risa Shea, Topic, and these guys can't be all stars, but it's less for sure. So I think the more casual NBA fan, which is the majority of people that are digesting all this stuff, they kind of take it as that. But I think there's a lot of value beneath the top level, and then there's a ton of really good role players in this draft. It's deep with really good like late first value. There's probably 40, 45 guys that could go in the first round that are worth that first round pick. And there's always stars that pop up out of nowhere. You guys know that. We all know that. So it's bound to happen this year too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's pretty much where I think me and Ryan have both landed at. That it may not be the draft that you're swinging for that franchise cornerstone, but there's a ton of useful guys that are going to carve out some long-term NBA careers. So Ryan, to you off the bat, you pretty much in agreement there? Any more changes in your mindset the more that we get closer to the draft and dive into things?
Yeah, watching these NBA playoffs especially, I think it's made me appreciate more kind of the role players and the impact that they've had on this game. I mean, even just looking at the Pacers when guys went down, even with the Knicks too at times, still had a bunch of guys come in that were, heralded players coming out of their class. Even when you look at the Pacers, like Obi Toppin, was drafted highly, but he wasn't regarded as an all-star type prospect. He's developed into a really nice player. Ben Shepherd, late first round pick, he was starting by the end. Nemhard, I mean, if you're able to hit on some of these guys, they can really make life easier for you in terms of paying those top flight players that you have and having these guys kind of fill in from the back. So as more and more the draft process has gone along, I think I've grown to kind of appreciate some of these guys more and be like, oh, I could definitely see them playing X role just like X player did throughout these playoffs. Because at the end of the day, it still is all about your stars, but surrounding them with the right talent. And I think this draft has quite a few guys that could be nice complementary pieces as they go forward in the NBA playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's get into it and talk a little bit about this class. So yesterday was the deadline for guys to decide whether they were going back to school or fully declare. Ryan Coyle, I'm going to throw it to you. Talk about some of those names that might have surprised you for their decision making and any other names that you want to mention here.
Yeah, so I think Coleman Hawkins was kind of the biggest one going into yesterday, whether he was going to stay or go. I mean, it was a real straight 50-50. I think he'll wind up making more this year playing college, wherever he wants to go. I think Arkansas could be a really good fit for him, and I think that would be an awesome move because I think Arkansas could be really good next year if they find a way to get him to go with Adu there in the front court. But he was, in my mind, the biggest, stay or go type guy, the biggest 50-50 in terms of NBA. But Mark Sears going back, I thought that was the best move kind of for college basketball. We got a lot of dudes this year who were All-Americans last year that are returning to play. We haven't seen that in quite some time. Alabama football has a chance to be a better team than Alabama. Alabama basketball has a better chance to be better than Alabama football this year for the first time in forever. So that would be a pretty cool sight to see. But a lot of these guys returning and making the most of their eligibility in NIL, I think is awesome for college basketball fans like me. And give them maybe even a chance to show some more and get drafted in the NBA in next year or the year after that.
Yeah, definitely. And the NIL world has certainly shifted the tides a great deal here. But Ryan Hammer, any other names that we missed on that really jumped out to you?
There's always some surprises like Hunter Sallis. I really thought was going to stick in the draft because Wake brought in a ton of new guys, and I felt he was ready. He's big-bodied guard, but he's super skilled, and I thought he could have pushed into the first round. He probably wasn't hearing exactly what he wanted, and he's probably going to cut a decent check at school also. But I thought he would stick around. Alex Caravan, same kind of thing. He could have slipped into the first round. I get him going back. I know he's UConn through and through, and listen, if you can go back and try to three-peat, all power to you. I get that. Then there's a couple of guys like Jameer Watkins who came back who I really expected to stay in because he's not this prolific star in college. He is one of those versatile wings, good role players that I thought fit the NBA mold really well. A lot of draft people have been very high on him, but NBA scouts have not been high on him. So it's kind of on the contrary there. But Coleman too, like you mentioned, it kind of makes sense. And I will say Mark Sears, I didn't even think about that, Ryan. Like, it's so true. And people were complaining there's no stars besides Zach Edey. Like last year, Mark Sears is exactly what a college basketball star is. Small guard. He's come back for another year. He's experienced. He's a senior. Like, he's going to score minimum 21, 22 a game. He's going to be awesome. So it's exciting.
Yeah, and no player has benefited more than Mark Sears from seeing a run like Jalen Brunson and what he's doing and what a carbon copy that they kind of are on a basketball court. Will be fun to see him just take over in college for another season there. But now that we do know that the draft is set, I do want to dive into some of the risers and fallers for this year's draft class, kind of talk about my kind of read on things from the combine, some of the guys who we're seeing climbing up the mock drafts and all the other reports coming out. So Ryan Coyle, I'll throw it to you first. Is there any specific name that you want to lead with that maybe has climbed up a couple pegs higher than you expected to at this point in the game?
I think when we go back to it, what I was kind of saying at the beginning of the show with the guys where you kind of really start to appreciate the role players, Devin Carter, I think, is the guy that's really benefited the most. He's a couple inches shorter than him, but we talked about it before, Sean, where I think the way he plays and what he can bring to a team is very similar to what Josh Hart showed the ability to do. And I feel like, a game in the playoffs, he could be that guy that goes in there for that 4 or 5 minute swing and flips a game on its head and really, flips the switch for his team and kind of elevates them to a next level. He's a perfect guy to start his career on a second level, secondary type of player in the rotation, and then kind of evolve into a starter as we go on. But I think he's been the guy that, especially after his combine performance as well, he tested off the charts there. And when you go back and you watch the film, I think I said he had 11 double doubles this year with points and rebounds as a 6'3" guard. Just plays the game at an incredibly hard level. Super fun player to watch, and definitely I think the biggest riser that we can kind of talk about at this stage.
Yeah, that was the number one surprise that I had as well. And selfishly, as a guy rooting for the Sixers to land him with that 16th pick, I've been a little disappointed with how high that he has slid up boards. But Ryan Hammer, I'll throw it to you. Talk to me a little bit about what you've seen from Devin Carter. Where you kind of have a gauge for where you think he'll go in this draft class and overall how he projects at the NBA level.
Yeah, and his floor probably is like that 16, 17 spot. If you're the Sixers and they still have that pick and they don't take him, he's on the board. There better be someone else that's pretty damn good available. It's funny because so I saw him play live for the first time. He was at Providence his first year. I guess it was like 2 years ago. I watched him play Maryland early in the season in November up in Connecticut, and he was bad. I watched him play twice. He was legit bad. His shooting was awful. His mechanics were bad. He wasn't the same player he is. So at the start of this year, and even through a lot of the year, I had this predetermined notion and bias against him, which is unfair, but I just was like, there's no way this is the same player. I don't believe this. But game after game, and he's just consistently dominating everybody. He does every little thing. And the intensity, you mentioned Josh Hart, that's 100% there. The rebounding, crashing the glass, the work ethic, diving on loose balls, that's all there. He does a lot of things really good, though. His shot has become really nice. He's got really deep NBA range now. His passing has gotten better. So I like to see that Derek White mold also, which is really Josh Hart and the role player times a 10, times 100, because Derek White's not a borderline all-star, but people can make that case, have made that case for him at least.
Yeah.
And he's been really quality. But Devin's just there's no way he isn't at least decent in the NBA like a Josh Hart. There's a lot to like you said, high-level role player. I don't see the ceiling being unbelievable at all, never touching an all-star appearance in the NBA. I could be wrong on that, but it's hard not to like him. He'll probably be late lottery or right outside of it.
Yeah, and he's my type of guy from a player prospect standpoint, which I think Ryan and I don't always see eye to eye on this. But for me personally, I love to see a guy who I know what his defining traits or defining role is going to be at the NBA level. And I think you can build off away from there. That's Devin Carter, that you know exactly what he's going to be. He's going to be a hard-nosed defender. He's going to be competitive. He's going to do the little things, be scrappy. And once again, if he's there at 16, I'll be jumping for joy. It does look like it is looking unlikely that is going to be the case there. Another guy that I think did quite a job for himself during the combine specifically, and a lot in the scrimmages that really impressed me, is Baylor Shireman. That he's a guy that we know him. He's been around college forever. I believe he was a 5-year guy, 2 years at Creighton there. He's a dude that I also think projects pretty highly at the NBA level. That is going to be just one of those winning players that sticks around. So Ryan Hammer, I'll throw it right back to you. What's your kind of feel for Baylor Shireman? How much did he help him, and where can you see him coming off the board here?
Yeah, that's my guy right there, through and through. I've only spoken to him a few times on the personal level, but on the floor, man, like offensively, there's not a single thing he does not do well. Passing,
Yeah.
scoring, rebounding, scoring on all three levels. He can shoot. He's almost like maybe not Dalton Connect level, but unconscious in big moments where he's more than willing to take big shots and create big opportunities. He's turning 24 before the NBA season starts. I think if my math is right. So I don't think he'll ever touch like all-star appearances because usually by 24 if you're going to get to that level. But I agree with you. Like the age doesn't matter. I don't care. He should go. If the team took him in the lottery, I wouldn't be mad at all. I think he should be considered in the same spot where Devin Carter is, in the same kind of light that he is. And he's not being. I think that's unfair to him, but whatever. Someone's going to get a steal when you look at teams like the Knicks and the Pelicans and everyone in like that early 20s range that can use a guy like that. Like it makes a lot of sense. There's so much to like about his game.
Yeah, definitely. And I think age is something that's held way too highly against guys. And I get it from the long-term standpoint that you're obviously projecting what they can be, and this is more of a finished product. But Dalton Connect's another guy who I think fits right into this Baylor Shireman conversation where you know what you're going to get from day one. They're going to be plug-and-play, role-player type guys. And, like, there's still room to grow there. They're just, 23, 24 years old. But to throw it to you, Ryan Coyle, what's your thoughts on Baylor Shireman and what has impressed you through the pre-draft process?
Yeah, from watching him at Creighton and even a little bit at South Dakota State, when I would see him and think about him, I would think of just like a shooter. Like I feel like in big moments, he would be the guy to step up and make shots. But his overall game, I don't think gets enough credit for. I mean, a 6'7" wing, sure, that's pretty solid size, but he averaged 9 rebounds a game this year and almost 4 assists per game. He's got a little bit of everything to go down with a pretty good jump shot. I was a little bit concerned about the overall kind of shooting efficiency because at Creighton he shot 38% and 36%. When he shot at South Dakota State, 47% and 44%. So he shot better at a lower level. Does that athleticism kind of catch up to him and give him a little problems? Maybe. But he is another smart, kind of savvy player. He plays the game really well, and he's just going to be a winning type player, like Ryan said as well. So big fan of his. I think he's another guy that we could see on a playoff type roster next year, making impactful plays, 14 to 16 minutes a game in a playoff series.
Yeah, and that's what I like. Like the guys that you know exactly what they're going to be is really appealing to me when you're projecting how they translate. Ryan Hammer, I did want to throw it to you. Is there any guy that you're surprised by how much they've climbed up the ranks kind of recently through this pre-draft process compared to your expectations?
Yeah, there's always a few guys. Tajon Salon is one of the international guys that he wasn't at the combine, and we saw this last year. Not so much with Victor because he was going number one, but Bilal Coulibaly was playing playoff basketball while everyone is playing combine practice and showcase and pro day basketball, which is hard to take with a grain of salt at times. But Salon is playing some of his best ball, and so is Risa Shea, but he was kind of already getting the hype. But he's playing in the French league, and it benefited him a lot because like I said, no one else is really playing. But he looks good. He's playing his best ball. He's really young, so he's on the right trajectory that you want to see. I think he was probably mid to late first, and now he's probably going to get considered to where teams like OKC are at 12 in the lottery and teams like that, which I don't hate anymore. I still have some questions about it. I have mixed feelings, but it surprised me, but I understand it, so I get it.
Yeah, he's another guy that I have on my list that I've been surprised by how high he's climbed, but there's absolutely kind of a pop in his game that like the more I've watched him, the more I liked him. Still some questions to be answered there. Another guy that I kind of want to throw in the conversation, more so for comparing them, and there's quite a gap in kind of where they seem to be projected, but Bobby Klintman is a guy that I fell in love with last year, that I really liked him at Wake Forest. I was disappointed that he kind of pulled out of last year's draft, and I don't think he did himself a ton of favors in this specific season. I guess kind of my question is like with these international prospects, how like we've seen the good and the bad for sure. The ways where it's gone good, the ways that it's gone bad. But like with these guys, how difficult is it to project what their situation is going to be at the NBA compared to like the role versus making the adjustment at the talent level? Or what's kind of your thoughts on projecting that?
Yeah, it's not easy, and especially like there are some leagues like the French league that has basically been putting on the last few years. They've always had decent talent come out of there, so it's easier to gauge guys in that league versus like if Hansen Yang is someone from the Chinese league. I actually don't even know if he's still in the draft for this year, if he's in the cycle or not. But it's hard to gauge guys like maybe like Topic, and that's why Luka didn't go one because you're like he's playing in a couple of leagues where you weren't sure, and then he was the MVP of the Euro League, so you're like maybe he should be go one, but. I think it's tougher to gauge certain leagues, but I think over time it's become easier and you can trust it more. The NBL and in Australia has become down under, and it's only going to keep growing. the internationals have taken over the NBA. They're continuing to take over the draft, and like next year, I know there's a ton of good international kids. There are domestic kids also that are awesome next year, but it's just going to keep growing and growing and growing. So at some point, people are going to have to just keep trusting it and just trusting what their eyes tell them.
Yeah, it did warm my heart. I forget if it was Salon or if it was Clintman, but I flipped on a game and he was going against Tiger Campbell, which brought a smile to my face.
Wow.
The UCLA.
Yeah, I don't know where he's playing. Holy crap.
Yeah, it was so that was a cool moment. I appreciated that there. But Ryan, do you have any other names you want to bring up as far as the risers category here?
I think one, maybe not necessarily a riser, but maybe a player where it's like people might be kind of overthinking it. And I'm not saying he's got this ceiling and or be capable of what Jalen Brunson did this playoffs, but I mean, what Tyler Kolek was able to do the last 2 years at Marquette, and just like watching more and more of him, like you can just see he's just a smooth player of the game. He's never going to wow you with athleticism like Brunson. He's never going to be the flashiest player, but he always just seems to be in the right spot on both ends and just getting stuff done. So I guess, Ryan, I'm kind of intrigued to see what your thoughts are on Tyler Kolek, and do you think that he could be, a starting point guard down the line?
Yeah, I have a little bit of mixed feelings. He's way too good to not be good in the league in some way. I've had stock of like he should go top 25, top 30, just like I felt like Andrew Nembhard and Brogdon and Brunson. Like I've always been a proponent and supporter of the experienced college guards for the most part. But it's tough because there are a lot of guards that are going to go in the range of him. There's guys like Tristan Newton that I think have a little more size and maybe a little more NBA transferability, but Kolek's passing is second to none. Like the guy is unbelievable. I don't know how he sees certain angles. He also plays with like a little switch of intensity that I'd probably say maybe 3 or 4 other guys in the class and really maybe in the entire country of college basketball had last year. But he's one of those guys that's way too good to not be good. He's not small. He's got decent size. I don't know if I can see him being a starting point guard down the line, but crazier things have happened. So
Yeah, that's one of my notes I had like on my player profile for him, where it's like, especially his passing, like off the bounce, like being able to just create. I think his passing, you could argue, is the best in the class. Like he's going to be able to at least, contribute that from day one. And I think he's a self-aware enough player where he knows like, all right, I have to be a pass first guy. I'm not going to be a guy that goes out there and averages 20 a game. And he's self-aware enough where, like you said, he's good enough where he's going to find a role and find a way to stick in the league.
Yeah, I think that's all completely fair, and I like Kolek quite a bit. So definitely a guy that I will be rooting for. He's a guy that like, despite how much I like him and feel about him, I always feel like there's guys that I straight up think are not as talented as basketball players, but I feel better about like the way that they project, and I think a lot of it comes back to like the role conversation with things. So we'll see on that one as well. I did want to throw a couple more names out here. 2 of the more controversial guys in this class. Number one, I want to start with Zach Edey here. Is Zach Edey, I'll be the number one hand up that going into the season, I did not see a world where this guy could succeed at the NBA level. This year, he kind of changed my mind. The way that he was able to kind of leverage some of the pick and roll coverage this year, the way that he was able to just move a little bit better and obviously just take his game to new heights overall with that Purdue team. Ryan, what do you think about Zach Edey and how he projects at the NBA level?
Yeah, it's tough. Man, I still have so many mixed feelings. If he came out and was a starter in 3 years, I'd be like, sure. And if you told me he was in the G League in 3 years, I'd be like, sure. Yeah. He's probably not gonna be in the G League. Like he's at some point, it's kind of like Kolek, but like times 5. At some point, production has to be taken into consideration, no matter how he gets it. He's way too dominant. There's a reason that not a single person, other than maybe clinging a little bit in the national title game, were really able to stop him. And other than like Northwestern and in their small gym sometimes. But like he's gotten so good. He's improved. People don't give him credit for, like you kind of mentioned it, where he's improved so much in the little things in his footwork. His fitness has gotten so good. His free throw shooting, which usually for non-shooters projects for a jumper or an outside shot. I don't think he's ever going to probably shoot more than a couple of handful of threes in his entire NBA career because teams aren't going to let him do that. But he's reliable when he gets to the free throw line because he has to be, because he gets there so often, and he does some of the little things so well that are impossible to guard against. So I think the hope is for him to be like a Zubac. I think that's his ceiling, which is great because you're a starting center and a good center on a championship team for years to come. Can he get there? Probably, maybe he can, but we'll see how that goes. I have my doubts also. Last year, you asked me the same question. I'm like, there's no way. There's no way I'm wasting a first round pick on him, but he'll go in the first round for sure this year.
Yeah. Beef, what do you think about Edey?
Yeah, his work ethic, I think, is the thing that sticks out most to me because, I mean, you could say what you want, where it's like, oh, he's 7'3", 7'4", he's going to be good regardless. But he still came into college as like the 400th ranked recruit. Like he had to work himself up from there. And you don't just work yourself into being a two-time national player of the year and arguably one of the best, 5 to 10 college basketball players since 2000, just falling out of bed and being tall. Like we've seen guys at that size before come into the college game and have no type of career whatsoever. So he's given me no reason to believe in the past why he won't continue to improve and get better. And I think one of the more, I guess, surprising things from the combine was all the the shuttle drills and all the agility type stuff. He tested better than Kling in it. So if you're going to say Klingon has the mobility to, go out on the perimeter and guard, you can't really, I think, throw that so much against Edey. I'm not saying Edey's going to be out there switching on guys, but he's got the ability to kind of hold his own in terms of moving, and then he's just going to be big enough to take up spots in the paint as well. So his mobility, I think, kind of gets over talked about a little bit just because he's so massive and you're just not used to seeing dudes that big moving at that level. But I'm not going to bet against this guy. He, from what he's done in college and the type of improvement that he's shown, I'm not going to bet against that. So I'm a believer in Edey, and I'm gonna be rooting for him too because I feel like so many people are rooting for him to fail.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I landed on too. And it also meant something to me. Nick Nurse spoke incredibly highly of him, who worked with him with Team Canada over there. Talked a lot about like the competitiveness that drives him and the way that he works, which is stuff that you don't always like hear with a lot of these big guys specifically. I've seen a lot of the Boban Marjanovic comparisons thrown his way, and I just think he's going to be better than that. I still haven't decided on a role, and I think like the Zubac top end thing might even be a little bit too high for what he gets to. But I do see a world where like the best route for him is kind of this like change up innings eater big man that you just throw in the game for a couple minutes at a time. And whether that is to get the opposing team in foul trouble or just to get some free points to dump it down with him on the block for a couple of stretches, it does change the game in a way. So I'm pretty much with you that I am rooting for Edey and hope things do work out, but certainly a mystery in this draft. And another guy that is absolutely in a mystery in a lot of different ways, Bronny James. So Bronny James is a guy that I think is one of the more controversial for sure, for obvious reasons here. It does feel like we are going to hear Bronny James's name called in the draft. So Beef, I'll throw it to you first here. What kind of, has there been anything that has changed in your mind since we originally talked about him after the combine? Or are you still out on Bronny completely?
I'm still out on him, and I'm starting to get to the point where it's like I'm annoyed because people are like, "Oh, well, I can, definitely see him being a good NBA player just because he's LeBron's son." Like it doesn't mean he hasn't shown you like for good reason, especially this year at USC. But then even like in high school, like he was slowly rising, but he's still an undersized kind of wannabe combo guard. He hasn't shown us in flashes really at all that he can be a superstar type player. He's just going to have a couple ESPN highlights because it was a steal and a dunk because he was Bronny James. Like uh, I'm not saying I'm rooting against the kid, but the LeBron camp with this situation, I am rooting against because that's just being detrimental to the kid. Where you're like, he's not going to take a two-way deal. All right, so what are you going to do? Stick his ass on the bench? Because even if LeBron if he wants to still win, I don't think putting Bronny in the game with him on November 1st or whenever the season starts, that's a winning formula for the Lakers.
Yeah, it did cross my mind that if he does go on another team, we could see LeBron with a chase down block on his son, which that would be kind of cool in my mind. But yeah, I don't know. Ryan Hammer, what is your thoughts on Bronny James?
Yeah, it's I know that everything is genuine. His intentions are always good, and they're not like it's hard because he's never ever gonna get judged whether he's amazing or not or awful or somewhere in the middle. He's never gonna get judged fairly in a good and bad way. Like it kind of just is what it is, and obviously they feed into it a little bit as they should. Like that's who they are. He's LeBron's son. Like it kind of is what it is. I would not use a draft pick on him. I would probably go spend an undrafted pick on him and put him into a two-way if I could, or put him in the G League. Obviously, he doesn't want to do that. But it's tough. There is some sort of nepotism involved. 100%. We'd all be blind if we didn't admit that. But that's kind of the world we live in. And it would not be the first time, and it won't be the last time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hate to be fully negative because I do think there's a world where in a couple years from now, like this guy is ready. He did have like a brutal path. Like we know the heart issue, and that USC team was a disaster as a whole this year. So I don't think we're viewing him in the best light that is the case. But the bottom line is he's just straight up not quite an NBA player right now. And we got to kind of call a spade a spade. And by the way, I do want to give a quick shout out to our guy, Jay Ziza here, who is sticking in the draft from Bowling Green, averaged a whopping 0.7 points per game on 12.5% from the field this season. His uncle also happens to be the owner of the Pistons. So Bronny may not even be the worst example of nepotism in this draft.
That shit is so much worse. If he even gets what are they going to give him? They're going to give him a G League deal, or are they going to get that shit is crazy.
Yeah, I believe he had one basket this year, and it occurred when they were up 84-44 against.
I saw it. My man Ben Pfeiffer posted it. It was tough. It was off a dribble handoff, and he was like fadeaway three. He's only like 6 feet tall, also. So
he put up my senior year D3 stat line that you just read out right there.
Here we go.
Getting on the board. Yeah, you might as well declare their beef. But
yeah, I mean, I did declare. There was a video and everything.
Yeah, there we go. But for all the risers, there do have to be some fallers. So I did want to talk about some guys that are falling down the ranks a little bit more than I expected. Number one, I want to start with is Matas Buzelis. I love Matas. He's a guy that has the pop to me. Obviously played with that Ignite team. He was also in the Rising Stars game where he really made an impression on me because he was kind of just going eye to eye against some of these legitimate NBA players. He's very Franz Wagner to me. That's probably the number one player comp that I would give him. Ryan Hammer, what are your thoughts on Matas Buzelis?
I like Matas a lot. People get on him a lot because he's an upside play for sure. There is a floor, but it's all for the upside swing. To be that long and tall and have that level of skills on the ball and move and mobility wise, it's very rare. People don't really seem to realize that for some reason. The shooting and the turnovers and decision making, he makes some terrible decisions on Ignite, but that's also partially because he's playing on Ignite and they don't play with a real system at all. And it kind of is what it is. And there's focus concerns, defensive concerns. These are all things that it's a lot, but you can easily adjust and tweak in the right team, the right system, and the right coaching and stuff like that, and mentors. On the skill set alone, I would bet to use a top 5 pick on him. All the Pistons fans get pissed at me when I'm like 5 Mattis because he fell here. You should take him, and they're like, we don't want a guy who can't shoot. I'm like, he can shoot. He'll be fine eventually. Hopefully, that's the hope and stuff like that. But I like him a lot. I understand why people are concerned about him, but there are things that they are concerned about that are very fixable. So.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. And the decision making is probably the number one thing that jumps out as a negative to me. The shooting, there's obviously concerns as well. He's a highlight reel type guy that he does live for the big moments, sometimes at his own expense. Beef, I know we've texted back and forth about him a little bit. Still pretty high on your board as well?
Yeah, I really like his game. I mean, I think I was saying to you, why isn't he being talked about as the number one player? Because he's got some eye-popping athleticism to him, and that might, he might not get looked at it because he's a scrawny kind of white kid, but he's got some eye-popping athleticism where on those dunks, his head is almost above the rim, and just some of the moves, he's got a smooth game as well to him. I really like him, and I think I won't be surprised 2-3 years from now that he's looked at as the best player out of this class.
Yeah, I think that's on the table as well. I absolutely think he should hear his name in the top 5, and it seems to be trending towards that not being the case. So it will be interesting. And he's been a high pedigree guy for the entirety of his basketball career. It's not like this guy came out of nowhere. So will be interesting to see there. Another guy I wanted to bring up is Kyle Filipowski. Kind of a bit of a weird trajectory for him. He obviously stuck in that second year at Duke. I thought he was going to be a one-and-done guy last year, ultimately came back, did show some signs of progress, but I don't think he necessarily took those next steps. I do think he benefited from having Jared McCain and a little bit of a better system this year for that team as a whole, but it does feel like he's kind of sunk to this fringe first-round pick, back end of the first-round type guy, when I did think that he would at least be a guy that's for sure hearing his name called in the teens. So, Ryan Hammer, what are you seeing from Filipowski, and what's your gauge on where he hears his name called?
Yeah, it should be in the first round because another thing on production and his ability to stretch in some way, and he's just overall a good player. Concern is almost like a positional thing, which is strange because I'm very anti strict positions, but he's not going to be able to compete consistently against true NBA bigs, and I don't think he's going to be able to keep up with fours either, true forwards that would dominate him, and that worries me is that he doesn't fit either. So he's a little bit of a tweener, but not in a good way, which most of the tweeners are I don't know who the top of my head, Jaren Jackson, John Collins, those guys are tweeners in a good way. So that kind of worries me a little bit, and his physicality and his lack of plus wingspan and stuff like that. I don't think he's super fast and agile, and there's some defensive concerns. So I think first round, end of the first round, fine. I don't know. I have some weird concerns, and I think he'll be a good rotational big, or he'll be a rotational big, whether it's good or not good for a little while. So
Yeah. Beef, what about you?
Yeah, he's another player for me where it's like, don't overthink it. He's a good player. I think he's going to be able to contribute on an NBA floor from day one. It's not like we're buying into a bunch of upside for him and it's like we could completely strike out on this guy. He has the skill set where I think he could be a tough cover for some bigs out on the perimeter, but then when you get on the defensive end, he could struggle a little bit. But a player that I was able to watch even in high school in person, he has that kind of grab and go ability where he can grab it off the rim at 6'10" and he can go down and initiate offense right away. He's a good enough passer. I think he's got a good enough handle where he's not going to be asked to do that every play. But if he can go in there and do that in spurts for an offense, that's just another added element. So you combine that with a nice half court game as well and the ability to step out and shoot at that size. I think that's an NBA player from day one. And once again, with this draft, we're not really looking for all-stars. We're looking for guys that are role players and mostly bench players. And I think that fits him to a T. So another player where good college player, I'm not going to overthink it. I think we've been seeing more and more of that in the NBA these days.
Yeah, the matchup concerns are definitely there. I'm really intrigued by using him off the short roll and having him be a playmaker off that. I think that's becoming more and more valuable in today's NBA, even just like with the Dallas Mavericks like right now, seeing how much Derek Lively has been able to open things up by spraying it to the corners and creating things. That's a role that I could see Filipowski really finding his way. I do see some of the grab and go ability, so I wouldn't hesitate too much by using a first round pick on him. But I do see, I guess I'm just a little bit surprised by how much that scale has shifted towards the back end of the first. And another guy that doesn't even seem certain to hear his name called in the first round at this point, Kevin McCullough Jr. I've been kind of really surprised to see the way that his stock has gone. So, Beef, I'll throw it to you first. What are you seeing from him, and any thoughts on where you think his name is called?
He had a really weird end to his career at Kansas. I think that kind of put not a red flag, but just kind of like I don't know what the proper term is, but he was another really good college player, and it just kind of ended poorly. So I think sour taste in someone's mouth, maybe that's what we're looking for. But another player where ideal size on the wing at 6'7", doesn't really isn't like a great shooter. I don't think he was more enough of like a volume shooter in college where his sample size is that big enough. But just a really rock solid overall player. But Sean, when you say, defining traits, defining skills, there's not something I think besides maybe on the defensive end a little bit where I could point to and be like, wow, that's something that's really going to be impactful for him and going to be able to stick at the next level. But if we look back in 5 years and he is a rotational piece, I won't be surprised. But another player where we might just be overthinking a little bit because he is an older guy. He doesn't really have much potential. Could he go in there tomorrow and play? I think so, but I'm not the highest on McCullough. I'd rather take, a chance on some of these other wings.
Interesting. Ryan Hammer, any thoughts by you?
Yeah, he feels like one of those true like older college players who's been in college because he's not ready to make the NBA jump. Like he's a wing. He's not a plus shooter. He's basically Josh Hart, but in college, where he's not a plus shooter, but he works hard. He does a lot of little things. He can rebound. He's not super tall for his position. That doesn't mean he's going to be Josh Hart in the NBA because that's not Josh Hart wasn't the current Josh Hart when he was in college. He was very different. So he kind of fits into his new role. I think that's why McCullough has fallen off a little bit. And last year, and this year too, but more last year, a lot of draft people were high on him, and he did take leaps this year. Like he broke out as a scorer, scoring like I don't know how probably 9-10 more points a game. I think he's a playmaker. He doubled his assist totals and stuff, and so there are a lot of positives there. But there are just so many other wings. We talked about guys like Shireman and who's older, and Furphy who's younger, guys like that have much more upside and they're much more seamless transition into the NBA. We could be wrong, and McCullough could prove us all wrong, like Josh Hart has. But I take my bets elsewhere.
Yeah, that's all fair. And McCullough's not a guy that I have stamped as my guy or anything like that. He just kind of falls into, I guess, a category of I almost feel bad for him to an extent. Like, as you mentioned, when looking at it, like he went from 10.7 points per game last year to 18.3 this year. Good rebounding numbers. His playmaking went from 2.4 to 4.1, increases 3-point percentage, increases field goal percentage, free throw percentage. It's like I felt like he took the strides that he needed to, but at the same time, like I see it as well. So I guess I feel a little disappointed for the guy. The last guy that I had in my followers list, I guess kind of expected here to an extent, but Justin Edwards was a dude that wildly disappointed this year, and still a guy that I would be willing to take a lottery pick on, or take a little lottery ticket on, not a lottery pick for sure. But Justin Edwards, a guy that has the pedigree, definitely underperformed and wasn't able to really carve out the lane for himself. Showed a couple flashes this year. But Ryan Hammer, what are your thoughts on Justin Edwards as how he projects to the NBA?
Yeah, his game is probably better suited for the NBA, for being honest. And I think he could be fine, and he very well might be. There have been a lot of guys like this in the past few years that what's his name is not a good example from Kentucky. A couple of years ago, I'm drawing a blank. Chris Livingston or whatever it was last year, like not a good example because he was actually terrible at Kentucky, and like Justin Edwards was better than that. But there are guys that are better suited for the NBA. And he was a high-ranked recruit for a reason. The talent was still there. The flashes were there at Kentucky this year. Like, you could see it. And I think you can go back into some pre-college and for him pre-Kentucky tape into Team USA and high school and EYBL stuff. But it's just harder, and that's why he's probably not going to be go in the first round. But if you told me, it's kind of like Peyton Watson, actually, too. If you told me that someone took him at 30, I'd be like, all right, well, they're taking a flat in the Celtics. Like, if the Jazz took him at 29, I'd be like, all right, sure. I guess that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Beef, how about you?
Yeah, Edwards is the next guy on my like kind of film breakdown that I'm doing, but from knowing him from the Philadelphia area, still a guy that I would be willing to take a risk on just because I always value, I don't know about you guys, but like if you're able to see these guys in person, the athleticism or just the space that they cover. Like I remember last year, I know he didn't have much of an impact this year, but Jarris Walker, just the space he covers like in person was kind of eye-opening. The athleticism that Edwards was able to show off at the high school level was pretty eye-popping. The frame, I think, is certainly what needs the most work if he's going to be able to guard wings. But Sean, you said it too. He showed it in flashes. I mean, this was a pretty much a big-time outlier, but that Alabama game, I got it in front of me, 10 of 10 from the field, 4 of 4 from 3, 28 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists. Like, obviously, he's not going to be that type of player, but you saw it in spurts. And it's kind of the way that Kentucky team goes. Like, Rob Dillingham, he could go out there one night and he could have 25. The next night, he could be playing 8 minutes and not scoring more than 5 points. Like, that's the way Calipari kind of rolls. And with that Kentucky team this year, they were playing, 10, 11 guys almost on a nightly basis. So it's kind of hard to feed a lot of mouths there. So another player where I think where the NBA, like Ryan said, might be suited better for him and his overall skill set, because I think his athleticism and just be able to get out there and transition, but he does have some work to do on his body still. I would have liked to see him go back for like one more year of college, maybe even transfer elsewhere. But I'm still excited about kind of his long-term ceiling. And like you said, Sean, a guy that I would be willing to take a chance on at the end of the first round, because we know too how teams really love and value that pedigree. He was the projected number 1 pick on most boards coming into the season. So
yeah, definitely. And are there any other names that you guys want to bring up as far as the followers category before we move on?
One player I just kind of had my eyes on that I was kind of curious to what you guys think about him. He's not even being discussed really as a draft pick right now. I think he's more of an undrafted player, but I'm a little confused as to why. Is Antonio Reeves out of Kentucky as well? 20 points a game this year. Shot the ball 45%. He shot at 40% last year, 39% the year before. So 3 straight years of shooting about 40% or higher. And he rebounds. He's a 6'6" guard. I'm kind of curious as what your guys' thoughts are on him, because I think there's going to be a spot for him, and he could be one of those intriguing kind of undrafted free agents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of remember Cole Swider when he came out and he played a little bit for the Lakers in the G League, and he hasn't fully popped in, or the Heat also, I think. But Reeves is like, you would think he'd be a prototypical 3-and-D wing, mostly just a 3 wing, to be honest. But like such a prolific shooter and good length, normal wing size. I kind of agree with you that people aren't at least talking about him. And then if he went undrafted, it's kind of like, sure, okay, like he'll have his chance though. But I like him also. Age and, like I said, defensively, and his ceiling of what he can do besides shoot off the wing is a concern. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm pretty much on the same page as you. He's a guy that I would probably take a chance on more so. I've seen a lot of kind of these like overseas guys sneaking into the back end. Like if I'm taking a chance, like I do think there's a little something there with Reeves. And I think it's also telling some of the guys that he has outshined, that like the Justin Edwards of the world, where he looked significantly better than for all of this season and throughout his Kentucky career or his time in college as a whole. So yeah, I'm more or less with you there, and kind of surprised the lack of buzz. He was a guy that I expected to do a little more for himself at the combine, though, to be perfectly honest, that I thought he might make a little buzz about himself, which didn't seem to fully come together there, but we will see. I do have a couple guys I want to bring up that I think me and Ryan have a little bit of a disagreement on, that Ryan Hammer, I want to hear your thoughts on. The number one I want to start with is Stephon Castle. And my biggest pushback, I'm not really a Castle guy. I think I feel a little bad for the situation. That kind of my take is if you take him off that UConn team completely, I think they probably still win the national championship. And that says way more about UConn than it does about Castle. But it also falls into my like, I'm just not 100% sure of what his NBA role is. I saw the talks of him not working out with teams with starting point guards. So it's clear that he thinks himself as a point guard. I don't know if I necessarily feel that way either. So Ryan Hammer, talk me through how you feel about Stephon Castle.
That part is crazy to me because he hasn't, like, I understand to an extent when you're like, I know I'm a top 5 to 10 pick. I understand, like, oh, we want to be very selective where we go, even if we sacrifice a little bit on our contract. But to play a position that he hasn't played since before his UConn days, like,
yeah,
really makes no sense to me. I don't think he's going to be that guy. He even like Anthony Black is the guy I bring up a lot from last year. I loved Anthony Black, but AB played point guard. Like, he clearly played point guard a lot at Arkansas, and the passing was better and it was crisper. It was more natural. You can see that the IQ was a little better. And I still don't think he was going to play point guard in the league because that's what his versatility was, what he offered so well. And I think that's what is the benefit for Castle. I have some concerns that the shot doesn't look great, but again, AB's shot has come around now, and his shot didn't look great either. It's only been 1 year for Anthony Black, but we'll see. But Castle, I think if the shot comes around, he should be good. The versatility is there, the size is there, the athleticism, the mobility. I don't know. There's something about it that some people think he should be like top 3, top 4, and the Spurs should take him at 4 no matter what. I am somewhere. I'm in the middle. I don't think he should go that high in a vacuum. Like, if someone took him there, sure. But I think there is downside more than people think, for sure.
The Ryans think exactly alike, word for word, pretty much.
Yeah, we did also land on, we had pretty much the same exact conversation with Anthony Black last year, which I was not an Anthony Black guy.
Smile, yeah.
yeah. So, that I think this is more kind of once again, that skill set thing that I think this is, I believe in Castle, I think more than I believed in Anthony Black. And for what it's worth, Anthony Black was better this year than I expected to be the case. So got to wear a little bit of the L on that one. But I do believe in kind of the size, the athleticism, the frame in Castle a little bit more. Beef, you all in on this guy?
I wouldn't say all in, but I would definitely comp it towards what Ryan was saying, my kind of Anthony Black love from last year. I will say one thing, though, and I did my episode on Stephon Castle yesterday. I was watching the No Ceilings video. That's a great kind of page for looking at NBA draft prospects. The first like, I don't know, say 10 minutes of like the 18-minute video was all just kind of scoring highlights. It did take him 2.5 minutes into that highlight film to shoot a shot that wasn't a layup. So yeah. I think that is a little bit concerning. And even when he is taking shots outside of the lane, they're kind of like floaters and like not really like driving floaters. Like, kind of, I'm scared to take a pull-up jump shot. I'm going to do like a half floater, half pull-up. So I think the confidence aspect is the biggest thing for him with the shot, because I don't think it looks bad. I just think he needs more of it and more game reps of it, because he looks a little bit hesitant at times. But that goes back to kind of my take on it as well, where he was always just so much more, bigger, faster, stronger, athletic than people. He hasn't ever had to probably shoot jump shots in a game. He's probably just been able to live at the rim his entire life. So I think that's something that's going to come. And if it doesn't, that might be why he doesn't make it in the league. But I still think, like Ryan was saying, he does so many other things well. And if he does wind up being a point guard at a 6'6", 6'5" frame, he's probably going to be bigger than everyone he's guarding on a nightly basis. I think his length is going to be a real difference maker in the next level.
Yeah, I also I hesitate to blame him for this fully, because obviously he's playing it within the UConn system, but he played in the dunker spot like a lot last year too. And I get like they got Tristan Newton and they got other guys, but that's just not what I want when I'm projecting a guy that is going to be a ball dominant guard to an extent. So I don't know. We'll see where he lands. I do think the talent level is mostly there, but it just feels like to me a bit more of a risk than where I see his name being called. So we'll see. That'll be our we'll have to revisit this one next year, Ryan, as well. Next question here. Who will be the best guard out of the Kentucky backcourt as they project to the NBA? Ryan Hammer, I'll throw it to you first.
Shit. It's tough, dude. I go back and forth with these guys all the time. I'll say Rob. I think Rob's got the more what do you want to call it? Like volatile result, or like there's more range that could happen, right? Up and down. But man, if you told me in 4 years he got his first All-Star appearance and he's cooking like Darius Garland, maybe not Trae Young level, but up there in that level, I'd be like, yep, I see it. Because when you watch him play, man, like there are certain things that he can't do defensively and physicality wise. Like he's never going to be able to do them like those small guards, but he is going to join 3 other guys that are 6'1" or smaller to go in the top 10 in the last decade. And they all do their things so well. And he has clear star upside. Like We talked about before, guys. People don't see the stars here. Rob has 100% probably the most star upside of anybody. It's so easy to see that his aura, everything about him. So I'll take the riskier bet on Rob.
I like it. Beef, where you at?
Yeah, Rob's probably my favorite player in this class, just talent-wise and just watching-wise. But I actually am going to slide with Reed here because I do think there is a world where Dillingham's size really limits him to an extent where it's like kind of he might be unplayable at points. And I think Reed Shepherd, if he's not going out there and scoring the ball at a 15, 16 point per game clip, he's going to be able to contribute enough other stuff well enough. My comparison for him was like a Mike Conley Jr., maybe like a little bit bigger of a version where he's never going to be the number one option on a team, but he could be a damn good 3 or 4 and be a guy that sticks around the league, shoots 40%, 5 assists, 14, 15 points per game, and he's in the league for 12 to 15 years. I think that is going to wind up being probably out of this class the best guard overall. So I'll go with Reed Shepherd there, and I think he's the perfect fit at number 4 for the Spurs.
Yeah, I flip-flopped on this one, and I do think a lot of it's going to have to do with what situation they each end up in, but I do think I land on Rob Dillingham, and the reason that I go that way, first off, I think he's very cut from the Emmanuel Quickley type cloth, like the joy that he plays with, the energy, the way that he can go on these spurts. It's just stuff that is exciting to watch, and I do believe in that. I think worst case is he's kind of one of these 6-man type energy guys, and that's not the worst case in the world by any means. And the other part with Reed Shepherd, I think he has this reputation as a defender that he hasn't quite earned. He's very much a gambler. He's very much a want to poke out, want to jump passing lanes, that I do have concerns for how he's going to actually have to hold up when you got to slide your feet and move with a guy on the defensive end. And I'm not sure if I'm 100% sold on that. And also, like, he was an absolute flamethrower, over 50% from 3. There's a part of me in my head that is like, I get you're a good shooter. That's very clear that that's the case. But like, is that a bit of an outlier for how good you were there? And I think that's the selling point for Reed Shepherd, is he's that good of a shooter. So will be interesting to see there. But I thought that was a fun conversation. To shift my next one, Ryan Hammer, I'll throw this to you first. You're on the clock with the number 1 overall pick. Who are you taking right now?
Listen, I'm a Hawks fan. It's a good question. I don't know if y'all knew that. I'm taking Alex Sarr. We're not looking back, especially for the Hawks in this position that we are in. Oh man, we have been gifted a golden opportunity to not have to completely blow it up. And I think Sarr presents that perfect opportunity. I don't think he has the most upside in the class, but I think he's up there, and I think he has a good floor, and I know he's going to be decent at the worst. So I would take Sarr and not look back.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you. And I just watched his podcast with Paul George too. The dude's all business too. He seems locked in. He's kind of cut from like a little bit Evan Mobley. Like, I even see a little bit of Pascal Siakam in his game. He moves incredibly well for his size. It's ridiculous stuff, the way he gets up and down the floor. I do think that there's going to be some fun lobs from Trae Young there. So I would go in the same exact direction. Beef, what about you?
I'll go off the wall for a little bit. I'll go my guy Matas. I'll take him.
Okay.
If I'm here saying we look back in 5 years, he's the best player in this class, why wouldn't I take him at number 1? I don't think it's that wild of a claim to say that. So let's look back at this one in 5 years and see how he's doing. But I think he's got a lot of potential, and he's a really exciting prospect in my eyes.
Yeah. All right, I'm cool. I won't argue with Matas there, but a little off the walls for sure. I got a couple more real quick I want to dive into. Cody Williams, an interesting one. That was the guy that I probably watched the most live of this year, because I saw a bunch of buzz. This could be the number 1 college guy, all this type of thing. I hesitate to be fully out on him because I think Jalen Williams was among one of my biggest misses when projecting guys, and we know that. I just don't know if I fully see it with Cody. I feel like his processing of the game is a little bit slow at times. He feels very much one of these theoretical guys, and he certainly has a pretty high floor as a basketball player, but I don't know if I'm in on the Cody Williams train. So Ryan Hammer, convince me if you think I'm wrong, or talk to me about him.
No, I won't talk you out of that. I'm kind of there. I think there's reason to be a lottery pick and upside. I don't think I wouldn't take a top 5 pick on him, or I wouldn't consider him at the top. Like at 1, like people have talked about. I've even seen mocks this week with him at like 4 and 5 on major platforms, which I just think is kind of crazy. And I don't think the shot, and I'm not fully convinced on the shot, at least on low volumes and the looks that he was getting and then his mechanics and stuff. And like you said, the decision making a little bit, but he does a lot of things well, and it's hard to deny that. So and the part of the archetype that he's in with his length and his size on the wing also, if it pans out, is perfect for the NBA. The Jalen Williams thing is interesting because like Jalen was like ridiculous in college, and like
Yeah.
he flew under the radar all year because he played at Santa Clara and they weren't that good and they were in the WCC. But very different because he had a couple of years of experience. Cody's the young, raw upside pick, and he's playing at a power school. And Jalen was like, I understand why people still wanted to overlook him, but Jalen was like, he was nasty. He was doing nasty things, and I don't think Cody's doing that. So I have a lot of questions, but I still see the lottery upside.
Yeah. Beef, where you at on Cody?
He's a player that I'm out on. He's one that where we were talking about guys like Kolek or Filipowski, where it's like have shown really good production in college, and I think there's a spot for them to continue to produce in the NBA. And like that's proven. There's a track record there, but people overthink that because there's not some world of upside. Then you go instead and pick a guy like Cody Williams, and in 3-4 years he's out of the league just because there's so much hypothetical there. But with a guy like Williams, if you take a team that doesn't have to go and play 25 minutes a game right away and develop, okay, maybe in a few years down the line we look and he's a good player. But if he goes to a team where he's kind of thrown into the fire right away, especially with his body right now, I don't think he's going to last. So he's a player I'm out on right now, at least at the kind of stage where he's potentially being picked. But if he's a guy that starts to fall down and you have multiple picks in the draft, or you have multiple guys in a spot in front of him that he doesn't have to play, I'd be comfortable with him there. But he's not a player I'm considering in the top 10, probably not even the lottery.
Yeah, I'm on the same page there, and kind of surprised we're in agreement there. I thought I was going to get some pushback with that. Two more here, and another guy that I'm out on completely. That's Ryan Dunn from Virginia here. And he could be absolutely incredible defensively. Being a guy that has lived through the Matisse Thybulle experience, I want no part of Ryan Dunn, and I just don't know if I see a world where he's able to hang offensively like at all at the NBA level. So Ryan Hammer, any thoughts on Ryan Dunn? Are you in on him more than I am?
Yeah, I definitely am. I just think like we talked about, you kind of talked about it before actually. You said like something about how like when guys are good at one thing, you know how you can use them and you know how you can't use them. To be fair, like there's nothing offensively. Like there's nothing other than being like in the dunker spot and doing little things that he should be doing. But he does some of those things pretty well. The shot and the offensive upside, it's really tough to see it being there. Could he, as long as he projects into literally just being not a net negative on offense, where he's not Ben Simmons. That's all he needs to be, is not Ben Simmons. You guys are Sixers fans, right? So y'all know what I'm talking about. Like he needs to not be Ben Simmons to be good, because he's an unbelievable defender. He's the size of a big. If you put him against, no one's really going to guard Embiid, Jokic, and Giannis, but like he is going to be a guy that you can put against those dudes, and Jason Tatum and Luka, and like he is going to be matched with those matchups if he can be on the floor and he's not so bad offensively. I would take the pick in the first round because simply off of that alone. And if I'm a team like, I know Utah wants to win now, but Utah or Washington or someone like that, or Portland, it's like, hey, we got a little bit of time. Like we're going to work on his offensive game. Like I would 100% take him.
Beef, you think it's worth the risk?
I do. I think too, you can't use against a player for playing in the Virginia offensive system. nobody's gonna put up good numbers in there. That's not a great excuse for kind of his lack of offensive game right now. But when do we ever look at a prospect coming out of Virginia and we're like, oh, he's really lighting it up on the offensive end? Even like Malcolm Brogdon, where he was just a good player, but I think that kind of even got used against him as he fell in the draft. And I will say with Ryan Dunn too, he's a bit of a late bloomer. Like there could still be some offensive game, because he's a guy that even after high school, he did a prep year as well. So not a and when you do a prep year, it's because you usually don't have that fully evolved kind of skill set yet for the next level, especially going to Virginia. And I remember when he was going into the prep year, because he did it in the Philadelphia area, he had like no offers, and then he blew up in AAU, and then they all started rolling in. So there still might be some room for growth, but like Ryan was saying, you can throw him out there and defend right away from day one. So there's a spot for him in the NBA.
Yeah, the defense is the real deal. I'm certainly scarred from the Matisse Thybulle and Ben Simmons experience here in Philadelphia, and how frustrating it was to try and figure out an offense around both those guys. So more of a Sixers specific thing, but no interest there. Will be interesting to see how his career plays out. My last question here, and I'm going to kind of jam two guys into this, kind of in the same stratosphere of where they're being drafted, although I kind of have a little bit of a gap here between Dalton Knecht and Jacoby Walter. Who do you think projects better in the short term and long term for the NBA? I'll throw that to you first, Ryan Hammer.
It's connected to both answers for me. I actually like Jacoby Walter. I think he's an underrated shooter because of the difficulty of shots. He has lengthy arms and he can get those off. Knecht has so much more upside. And so it's funny, we talked about like age before, and like I take a thing of real NBA age versus real age. They're both going into year one in the NBA, and it's easy to project Knecht getting incrementally better at the same scale as Jacoby Walter because Connect played at JUCO. He was amazing. He got to Northern Colorado. He got better. He was amazing. He got to Tennessee. He keeps stepping up in levels, and he's getting better every single time. We talked about Shireman, and I brought up Connect because that he is like the definition of a cold ass white boy. I have never seen that in my life. I swear. Like, since you can put him in the stratosphere of Jimmer level shooting in college and stuff. Like, it is unbelievable the level of confidence and just like poise he plays with no matter what situation is. I think he scored like 40 in that Elite Eight game. It was wild. Yeah. But he's next level. I think he's built for the NBA. There's no reason he should go outside the top 10. If like the Pistons or someone took him at 5, whatever, sure. I wouldn't be mad at all.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one. And I think he's a day one impact guy that he knows exactly his role. The movement shooting is incredibly impressive to me. I think there's a real world where Dalton Connect's the best shooter in this draft, that including the Reed Shepherds and everyone else in that. So I'm with you, and I'm a little bit more of a Jacoby skeptic. But Beef, where are you at?
I think out of this class, if you had to take one player and put him in the Western Conference Finals or the NBA Finals, he would be the guy that I would probably pick to go out there and be able to make an impact. Just that growth, like Ryan was saying, from JUCO to Northern Colorado to then freaking Tennessee and do what he did at Tennessee, lead them to an SEC title. And I'm a Walter guy as well. I think the upside is there. 14 games this year with at least 3 threes, 18 games with at least 15 or more. He showed it in spurts, but another player where we need to see a little bit more consistently. Last thing, I guess, on Connect, though, I was listening to a podcast earlier, and it was like Rick Barnes gave them kind of the Kevin Durant offense at one point where it was just like, give it to Dalton, get the fuck out of the way. Like, he had that ability to him, and he did that coming from Northern Colorado and went and took over the SEC this year. So I think that goes to tell you all you need to know about him. And I think he's going to be a really good NBA player and a player that I'm glad people aren't using the age kind of concern because he's shown the development track where he might even still be getting better. And he's got some really good athleticism too that I don't think is talked about enough.
Yeah. And good size too. He's the real deal, like 6'6". So I'm in on Connect. I'm excited to see where he falls and totally agree. He should be absolutely inside the top 10 there. So Ryan, I cannot thank you enough for hopping on with us tonight. It's at Ryan Hammer 1 or at Ryan Hammer 9 on all platforms, right?
Yeah. I think if people search my name, they should be able to find me. Hopefully.
Perfect. Anything else you got going on lately before the pre-draft process?
No, I'm just working for the draft and then summer league and stuff. But yeah, I appreciate y'all having me on. It was nice.
Yeah, absolutely. It was awesome chopping it up. Appreciate everyone that was tuning in, whether it be on Twitter or on YouTube there. Wherever you're at, make sure you're hitting that follow button, subscribe button. We will be talking to you next time with a ton of draft content coming up until that big day. So appreciate each and every one of you. Talk to you next time. Peace.